Jake Mitchell wiped the sweat from his face as he rode his horse along the old fence line. The sun was getting hot, and it was only 9 in the morning. He had been working on his ranch in Montana for 20 years, but he still loved these quiet morning rides. His horse Thunder knew this route well. They had checked this fence many times before. Thunder suddenly stopped walking, his ears pointed forward, and he made a soft noise. Jake looked around to see what had caught the horse's attention. At first, he thought it might be a deer or maybe a lost cow. But Thunder was acting strange, more worried than curious. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, patting Thunder's neck. The horse took a few steps toward a big oak tree that had been growing there for as long as Jake could remember. Under the tree, something brown was lying on the ground. Jake got off his horse and walked closer. It looked like an old canvas bag or pouch. Maybe someone had dropped it while camping. People sometimes came through this area, even though it was far from any roads. But as Jake got closer, he heard something that made him stop breathing for a moment. A tiny voice. So quiet, he almost missed it. The voice said one word. "Mama." Jake's heart started beating fast. He ran to the bag and knelt, down beside it. The canvas was old and dirty, tied at the top with a piece of rope. His hands shook as he untied the rope. He had been a soldier before he became a rancher, and he had seen many hard things. But nothing had prepared him for what he found inside that bag. A baby girl looked up at him with big dark eyes. She was so small and thin. Her lips were dry and cracked. Her hair was matted to her head with sweat and dirt. She was wearing a tiny pink dress that was too big for her and a diaper that needed changing. But she was alive. "Mama," she said again, her voice so weak Jake could barely hear her. Jake felt tears in his eyes. Who would leave a baby out here to die? The nearest house was his own ranch, and that was 5 miles away. The nearest town was 20 miles away. This little girl had been left here with no food, no water, nothing. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jake said softly. He had never talked to a baby before. He and his wife Sarah had tried for years to have children, but it never happened. "I'm going to help you." The baby girl tried to sit up, but she was too weak. Jake could see she was very sick. Her skin was hot and dry. She needed water and medical care right away. He looked around the bag to see if there was anything else. Inside, there were 3 diapers, all clean, an empty baby bottle, a small blanket that had been torn. That was all. No note, no name, nothing to tell him who this baby was or where she came from. Jake picked up the baby very carefully. She was so light, much too light for a child her size. He guessed she was about 1.5 years old, but she felt like she weighed nothing. She put her tiny hand on his chest and looked at him with those big eyes. "Mama?" she asked. "No, baby, I'm not your mama," Jake said, "but I'm going to find someone to help you." He carried her to his horse. Thunder seemed to understand that something important was happening. The horse stood very still while Jake figured out how to get on while holding the baby. It wasn't easy, but Jake managed it. He held the little girl close to his chest with one arm and held the reins with the other hand. Thunder walked carefully back toward the ranch house. Usually Jake would have made the horse run, but he didn't want to shake the baby too much. She, was so fragile. Every few minutes she would whisper, "Mama," and look around like she was searching for someone. Jake used his radio to call his wife. Sarah was at the house, probably working in her garden. She had been a nurse before they got married, and she still knew a lot about taking care of sick people. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully," Jake said into the radio. "I found a baby out by the old oak tree. She's very sick. Can you meet me halfway with some water and anything else you think she might need?" There was silence for a moment. Then Sarah's voice came back, sounding shocked. "A baby? Jake, are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious. She's dehydrated and weak. We need to get her to the hospital fast." "I'm getting in the truck right now," Sarah said. "I'll bring everything I can think of." Jake looked down at the baby in his arms. She had closed her eyes, but she was still breathing. Her little chest went up and down very slowly. He was scared she might die before they could get help. "Hold," "On, little one," he whispered. "We're going to take care of you." As Thunder carried them toward the ranch house, Jake wondered who could have done this terrible thing. What kind of person would leave a baby alone in the middle of nowhere? Was her mother hurt somewhere? Was someone looking for her? Or had someone just decided they didn't want her anymore? The baby opened her eyes again and looked at Jake. For a moment, she almost smiled. Then she said "Mama" one more time before closing her eyes again. Jake held her tighter and asked Thunder to walk a little faster. This little girl had already been through too much. But she was safe now. Jake didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. He was not going to let anything bad happen to her ever again. The sun was getting higher in the sky, and it was getting hotter. Jake could see his truck in the distance, and Sarah was running toward them with a bag in her hands. Help was coming. The baby was going to be okay. But Jake also knew that finding her was just the beginning. Someone had left this little girl to die, and they needed to find out who and why. More importantly, they needed to figure out what was going to happen to her now. She needed a family, a home, people who would love her and take care of her. As he held her small body against his chest, Jake felt something he had never felt before. This baby needed him, and he already knew he would do anything to protect her. Sarah Mitchell was watering her tomato plants when she heard Jake's voice on the radio. At first, she thought she had heard wrong. A baby? Out by the old oak tree? But the serious tone in her husband's voice told her this was not a joke. She dropped the watering can and ran into the house. Her nursing training from 20 years ago came back to her like it was yesterday. Dehydration in babies was very dangerous. They could die quickly without the right care. Sarah grabbed a clean towel from the kitchen and filled a bottle with clean water. She found the first aid kit from the bathroom and threw it into a bag. She also took some crackers and a banana. If the baby could eat solid food, she would need something gentle for her stomach. Sarah ran to the truck and started driving toward the place where she knew Jake would be coming from. Her hands were shaking as she held the steering wheel. She had always wanted children, but it never happened for her and Jake. Now there was a baby who needed help, and Sarah was scared they might be too late. She could see Jake on his horse in the distance. Thunder was walking faster than usual, but Jake was being careful not to bounce too much. As Sarah got closer, she could see Jake holding something small against his chest. Sarah stopped the truck and jumped out. Jake was getting off his horse, still holding the baby. When Sarah saw the little girl, she felt her heart break. The child was so tiny and sick-looking. Her skin was gray and her eyes were only half open. "Give her to me," Sarah said, reaching for the baby. Jake carefully passed her over. The little girl was burning hot with fever and she was breathing too fast. "How long do you think she was out there?" Sarah asked as she wrapped the baby in the clean towel. "I don't know," Jake said. "Could have been hours, could have been all night. Look at her, Sarah. Someone just left her there to die." Sarah opened the water bottle and put a few drops on the baby's lips. The little girl's tongue moved, trying to get more water. "She's very dehydrated. We need to get her to the hospital right now." They got into the truck with Jake driving and Sarah holding the baby. Sarah tried to give her tiny sips of water, but the baby was too weak to drink much. Every few minutes, the little girl would open her eyes and whisper, "Mama." Each time she said it, Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes. "Who would do this?" Sarah asked. "Who would leave a baby alone like this?" Jake was driving as fast as he could on the dirt road. "I don't know, but we're going to find out, after we make sure she's okay." The baby grabbed Sarah's finger with her tiny hand. Her grip was weak, but she held on tight. Sarah looked down at the little face and saw how beautiful she was under all the dirt and sickness. She had dark hair and the biggest brown eyes Sarah had ever seen. "What do you think her name is?" Sarah asked. "I don't know. There was nothing in the bag to tell us who she is." The ride to the hospital took 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. Sarah kept checking to make sure the baby was still breathing. A few times she got scared because the breathing became very slow and quiet. "Hang on, sweetie," Sarah whispered. "We're almost there. You're going to be okay." When they got to the hospital, Jake ran inside to get help while Sarah stayed with the baby. Two nurses came running out with a stretcher. They took the baby from Sarah's arms and rushed her inside. Dr. Martinez was waiting for them. He was a kind man who had taken care of everyone in their small town for many years. He looked at the baby and immediately started working. "When did you find her?" he asked Jake and Sarah. "About an hour ago," Jake said. "She was in a bag under the old oak tree on my property. No food, no water, nothing." Dr. Martinez listened to the baby's heart and breathing. He checked her temperature and looked in her mouth. "She's severely dehydrated. We need to get fluids into her right away." The nurses took the baby into a room and started putting tubes in her arms to give her water and medicine. Sarah wanted to go with her, but the doctor said they needed to work fast. Jake and Sarah sat in the waiting room. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about how the baby had held her finger. Jake kept running his hands through his hair, something he did when he was very worried. "She called for her mama," Sarah said quietly. "That poor little girl was looking for her mama." "Well, her mama wasn't there," Jake said, angry. "What kind of mother leaves her baby to die?" After 2 hours, Dr. Martinez came to talk to them. "She's stable now," he said. "We got fluids into her and her fever is coming down. She's going to be okay." Sarah felt like she could breathe again. "Can we see her?" "Yes, but she's sleeping now. The medicine we gave her will help her rest." They followed the doctor to a small room. The baby was lying in a hospital bed that looked too big for her. She had tubes in her arms and a mask over her nose to help her breathe better. But her color was better, and she was breathing normally. "How old do you think she is?" Sarah asked. "About 18 months, the doctor said. Maybe a little older. She's underweight, which makes it hard to tell. She hasn't been eating well for a while." Jake felt angry again. "How long was she out there?" "Hard to say for sure, but probably at least 12 hours. Maybe longer. If you hadn't found her when you did, she wouldn't have made it much longer." Sarah reached out and touched the baby's hand. Even in her sleep, the little fingers wrapped around Sarah's finger again. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "We need to call the police and social services. They'll start looking for her family. In the meantime, she needs to stay here for a few days so we can make sure she's completely healthy." A police officer named Tom Harrison came to the hospital. He was a friend of Jake and Sarah's, and he looked as upset as they felt when he heard the story. "I'll start making calls," Tom said. "Check missing children reports, see if anyone has reported a lost baby." "But Jake, you said there was nothing with her that could tell us who she is?" "Nothing. Just some diapers and an empty bottle, and this." Jake showed Tom the torn piece of blanket. "It's not much to go on." Tom looked at the small piece of fabric. "We'll do everything we can. Someone must be looking for her." But even as he said it, Tom didn't sound very sure. In his 20 years as a police officer, he had seen parents who didn't want their children. It made him sick to think about, but it happened. Sarah stayed at the hospital all day, sitting beside the baby's bed. Jake went home to take care of the animals, but he came back in the evening. The baby woke up a few times and drank some water. She looked at Sarah and Jake with curious eyes, but she seemed too tired to be scared. "Mama?" she asked once, looking around the room. "Your mama isn't here, sweetheart," Sarah said softly. "But we're here. We're going to take care of you." That night, Sarah didn't want to leave the hospital. The baby seemed to sleep better when someone was holding her hand. Jake brought Sarah some dinner and a pillow. "You don't have to stay all night," Jake said. "Yes, I do," Sarah said. "She shouldn't be alone. She's been alone too much already." Jake understood. He felt the same way. This little girl had already become important to them, even though they had only known her for one day. As Sarah sat in the chair beside the bed, holding the baby's tiny hand, she made a promise. No matter what happened, no matter who this little girl was or where she came from, Sarah would make sure she was loved and protected. She had been hurt enough already. Sheriff Tom Harrison had been a police officer for 20 years, but he had never worked on a case like this one. A baby left to die in the middle of nowhere with no clues about who she was or where she came from. He sat at his desk the morning, after Jake found her looking at the few things that had been in the bag with her. 3 clean diapers, an empty baby bottle with no special markings, a torn piece of what used to be a pink blanket. That was everything. No note, No name written anywhere. No toys or special items that might give them a clue. Tom picked up the piece of blanket and looked at it carefully. It was soft, the kind of material that cost more money than most people in their small town could afford. Someone with money had bought this blanket. But that didn't help much. Rich people lived in the big cities far away, not in their small farming community. The baby bottle was plain white plastic, the kind sold in every store. The EI diapers were a common brand that could be bought anywhere. Whoever had left this baby had been careful not to leave anything that could be traced back to them. Tom called the state police to see if any babies had been reported missing in the last few days. He also called hospitals in 3 nearby counties to ask if any young mothers had left without their babies. All the answers were the same: no missing babies, no worried families looking for a lost child. This made Tom feel sick to his stomach. It meant that whoever had left this baby didn't want her to be found. They had hoped she would die out there, and no one would ever know what happened to her. Tom decided to drive out to the place where Jake had found the baby. Maybe he could find some clues that Jake had missed. It was worth a try. The old oak tree sat by itself in a field about 5 miles from Jake's ranch house. Tom parked his police car and walked around the area slowly. He looked for tire tracks, footprints, anything that might tell him how the baby had gotten there. The ground was hard and dry. It hadn't rained in 2 weeks, so any tracks would be difficult to see. But Tom was good at his job. He had learned to notice things that other people missed. Near the tree, he found some marks in the dirt that looked like they might be from car tires. The marks were faint, but they were there. Tom took pictures and made notes about exactly where he found them. He also found a few pieces of trash that might have been dropped recently, a cigarette that hadn't been there long, a small piece of paper that might have blown out of a car window. Tom put everything in plastic bags to look at later. The most important thing Tom found was about 50 feet from the tree. Caught on a bush was a small piece of blue fabric. It looked like it came from a woman's shirt or dress. Tom carefully took it off the bush and put it in a bag. Tom drove back to town and went to the hospital to check on the baby. Dr. Martinez said she was doing much better. Her fever was gone and she was drinking water and eating some soft food. She had even smiled at one of the nurses. "Has she said anything besides Mama?" Tom asked. "A few words," the doctor said. She said up when she wanted to be picked up, and she said Baba when she wanted her bottle. She's definitely old enough to talk more than she is. She might be scared or confused. Tom went into the baby's room. Sarah Mitchell was there again, sitting in the chair beside the bed. The baby was awake, playing with a small stuffed bear that one of the nurses had brought her. "Any luck finding her family?" Sarah asked. "Not yet," Tom said. "But I found a few things at the place where Jake found her. I'm going to check with the state crime lab to see if they can tell us anything." The baby looked at Tom with her big dark eyes. She didn't seem afraid of him, but she stayed close to Sarah. Tom could see that she was already getting attached to Sarah, and Sarah was getting attached to her. "What's going to happen to her if you can't find her family?" Sarah asked. "Social services will have to find her a foster family," Tom said. "At least until we know more about who she is." Sarah's face showed how much this worried her. She's been through enough already. She needs to be somewhere stable, somewhere safe. Tom understood how Sarah felt. He could see that she was already thinking of this baby as her own child. Jake probably felt the same way. But Tom had to follow the law, and the law said that children without families had to go into the foster care system. Tom left the hospital and drove to the gas station on Highway 12. It was the closest business to Mazantidor where the baby had been found. Maybe someone there had seen something unusual in the last few days. The gas station owner was an old man named Pete, who had been running the place for 30 years. He knew everyone who lived in the area and noticed when strangers came through. "Yeah, I saw something strange 2 days ago," Pete said when Tom asked him about it. "Young woman, maybe 20 or 25 years old. She was crying and acting real upset about something." Tom felt his heart speed up. This might be the first real clue. "Can you describe her?" "Pretty girl, long dark hair, She was thin, too. Thin, like she hadn't been eating much. She bought some gas and a bottle of water, paid with cash. Did you see what kind of car she was driving? Old blue pickup truck. Looked like it had seen better days. She had something in the back of the truck, but I couldn't see what it was. Did she say anything to you? Pete thought for a moment. She asked for directions to the back roads that go toward the Mitchell Ranch, said she was looking for a quiet place to think. I thought it was strange because most people don't go out there unless they're visiting Jake and Sarah. Tom asked Pete if he had security cameras. Pete said yes, but the camera that pointed toward the gas pumps hadn't been working right for a week. The only camera that worked was the one inside the store. But I can show you the footage from inside, Pete said. You might be able to see her face. They went into the small office behind the store counter. Pete pulled up the security footage from 2 days ago. Tom watched as a young woman came into the store. She had long dark hair and was wearing a blue shirt, the same blue that matched the fabric Tom had found on the bush. The woman bought a bottle of water and paid with a $20 bill. She kept looking out the window toward her truck like she was worried about something. Her hands were shaking when she gave Pete the money. Can you make a copy of this for me? Tom asked. Sure can, Pete said. You think this has something to do with that baby Jake found? Maybe, Tom said. I can't say for sure yet. Tom took the copy of the security footage back to his office. He watched it several times, trying to see if he could learn anything else about the woman. She looked young and scared. She also looked like she hadn't slept in days. Tom called his friend who worked for the state police. He asked if they could check the footage to see if they could make the image clearer. Maybe they could get a better look at the woman's face, or find some other clue. While he waited for an answer, Tom started calling hospitals and clinics in a wider area. Maybe this woman had given birth recently. Maybe someone would remember her. On his 5th call, Tom got lucky. A nurse at a hospital 2 hours away remembered a young woman who had given birth 3 weeks ago. The woman had left the hospital with her baby, but she had seemed very upset and scared. Did she give you a name? Tom asked. She said her name was Mary, but she paid cash and didn't have any ID with her. We were worried about her, but legally we couldn't make her stay. Can you describe her? Young, maybe early 20s. Long, dark hair. Very thin. She seemed scared of someone, like she was running away from something. Tom felt like he was getting closer to the truth. This woman, whoever she was, had been scared enough to run away, and she had been scared enough to leave her baby where she hoped someone would find her and take care of her. But Tom still didn't know who the woman was or why she was so scared. And most importantly, he didn't know where she was now. Was she safe? Was she still running from someone? Or was she somewhere nearby, wondering if her baby was okay? Tom looked at the picture he had printed from the security camera. The woman's face was blurry, but he could see the fear in her eyes. She had made a terrible choice, but maybe she thought it was the only choice she had. Now Tom had to find her and learn the truth about what had happened. 3 days had passed since Jake found the baby under the oak tree. Dr. Martinez said she was healthy enough to leave the hospital, but there was one big problem. Where would she go? Mrs. Linda Foster from Social Services came to the hospital to talk about the baby's future. She was a kind woman who had been helping children for many years, but she looked tired and worried. We're having trouble finding a foster family for her right away, Mrs. Foster told Jake and Sarah. Most of our families are already taking care of other children, and babies need special care. Sarah had been at the hospital every day, feeding the baby and playing with her. The little girl had started to smile and laugh. She would reach for Sarah whenever she came into the room and cry when Sarah had to leave. What are our options? Jake asked. Well, there's a family about 2 hours away that might be able to take her next week, but they already have 3 other foster children. It wouldn't be the best situation for her. Sarah felt her heart breaking. This little girl had already been hurt so much. The idea of putting her in a house with strangers who were too busy to give her the attention she needed made Sarah feel sick. Is there anything else we can do? Sarah asked. Mrs. Foster looked at Jake and Sarah carefully. She had been watching. them with the baby for 3 days. She could see how much they cared about her and how much the baby had already bonded with them. Actually, there is one other option, Mrs. Foster said slowly. You two could become temporary foster parents, just until we find her real family or figure out a permanent solution. Jake and Sarah looked at each other. They had talked about this possibility, but they hadn't wanted to get their hopes up. What would that involve? Jake asked. You would need to take some classes about foster care. We would need to check your house to make sure it's safe for a baby, and you would need to understand that this might only be temporary. If we find her family, she would have to go back to them. Sarah looked through the window at the baby, who was sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed. How long would the classes take? Normally, it takes several weeks. But because this is an emergency situation, we can do a shortened version, maybe 5 days. And if we said yes, when could she come home with us? Sarah asked. If everything goes well with the classes and the house inspection, maybe by the end of next week. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. The baby would have to stay in the hospital for almost another week while they waited. It didn't seem fair. Jake put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. We want to do this, he said. This little girl needs a safe place to stay, and we can give her that. Are you both sure? Mrs. Foster asked. Foster care can be very difficult emotionally. You might fall in love with her and then have to give her up. Sarah wiped her eyes. We already love her. We can't just let her go to strangers when we can take care of her ourselves. Mrs. Foster smiled for the first time since she had arrived. I was hoping you would say that. I've been watching you with her, and I can see that you're already a family. The next week was very busy for Jake and Sarah. They had to go to classes every evening to learn about foster care. They learned about child development, how to handle difficult behaviors, and what to do in emergencies. During the day, they worked to get their house ready for a baby. They had never needed to baby-proof anything before. Jake put safety locks on all the cabinets and covered the electrical outlets. Sarah bought a crib, a high chair, clothes, toys, and everything else a baby would need. Their friends and neighbors in the small town heard about what they were doing. People started bringing things to help. Mrs. Peterson from the grocery store brought diapers and baby food. The Miller family brought a stroller and a car seat. Even tough old Pete from the gas station showed up with a bag full of stuffed animals. Heard, you folks are taking in that little girl, Pete said when he brought the toys. Good for you. She needs people who will love her. The whole town seemed excited about the baby coming to live with Jake and Sarah. Everyone had heard the story about how Jake found her, and everyone wanted to help. Sheriff Tom Harrison came by the house while Jake and Sarah were setting up the nursery. He had news about his investigation. I sent that security footage to the state police, Tom said. They were able to make the image a little clearer, but not enough to identify the woman. We also tested that piece of fabric I found, but there's no DNA on it. So you still don't know who she is? Sarah asked. No, but I'm not giving up. I've contacted police departments in 5 states, asking them to look for missing babies or young mothers in trouble. Someone somewhere knows something about this little girl. Jake was putting together the crib. What if you never find her mother? Then she'll go up for adoption. But that could take a long time. Months, maybe even a year or more. Sarah felt hopeful and scared at the same time. She wanted to keep this baby forever, but she also knew that somewhere out there might be a mother who was missing her child. On Friday afternoon, Mrs. Foster came to inspect the house. She looked at every room, checking to make sure everything was safe. She was impressed with how much work Jake and Sarah had done. This is perfect, Mrs. Foster said as she looked at the nursery. She's going to love it here. That evening, Jake and Sarah finished their foster care classes. The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been working with foster families for 15 years. You two are going to be wonderful foster parents, Mrs. Rodriguez said. I can tell that you really understand what this little girl needs. Love, patience, and stability. On Saturday morning, Jake and Sarah went to the hospital to bring the baby home. She had been there for a week, and all the nurses were sad to see her go. But they were happy that she was going to such a good family. She's been asking for you, Nurse Johnson told Sarah. Every time someone new comes into her room, she looks to see if it's you. The baby was wearing a new pink dress that Sarah had bought for her. When she saw Jake and Sarah come into the room, she smiled and reached for them. "Ready to come home, sweetheart?" Sarah asked as she picked up the baby. The baby looked at Sarah and said a new word. "Home?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, baby, we're going home." The drive from the hospital to the ranch was quiet. The baby sat in her new car seat, looking out the window at the trees and fields. When they turned into the driveway of the ranch, she seemed excited by all the open space. Jake carried her into the house while Sarah got her bags. The baby looked around at everything with wide eyes. When they went into the nursery, she clapped her hands and laughed. "Do you like your room?" Sarah asked. The baby pointed at the crib and said, "Bed." That first night was not easy. The baby woke up several times crying for her mama. Sarah would hold her and rock her until she went back to sleep. Jake helped too, walking around the house with her when she wouldn't settle down. "She's confused," Sarah said during one of the baby's crying spells. "She doesn't understand where her real mama is." "We'll just have to be patient," Jake said. "She's been through a lot." By Sunday morning, things were getting better. The baby ate breakfast in her high chair and seemed to enjoy being outside on the porch. She watched the horses in the pasture and laughed when Thunder came close to the fence. The baby still asked for her mama sometimes, but she was also starting to get attached to Jake and Sarah. She would hold Sarah's hand when they walked around the house. She would clap when Jake came in from working with the animals. That evening, as Sarah was giving the baby a bath, something wonderful happened. The baby looked up at Sarah and said a new word. "Mama Sarah?" Sarah felt her heart fill with joy. This little girl was starting to trust them. She was starting to feel safe. And for the first time since Jake found her under that tree, Sarah believed that everything was going to be okay. Whatever happened in the future, right now this baby was loved and cared for. She had a warm bed, plenty of food, and people who would do anything to protect her. That was what mattered most. 2 months had passed since the baby came to live with Jake and Sarah. She had grown stronger and healthier every day. Her cheeks were now round and pink, and she had gained 10 pounds. The thin, scared little girl that Jake had found under the oak tree was now a happy, laughing child. The baby still didn't have a real name. The hospital had called her Baby Jane Doe on her medical papers, but Jake and Sarah just called her Sweetheart, or Little One. They didn't want to give her a name until they knew for sure what would happen to her. Sheriff Tom Harrison had not given up looking for the baby's family. He had sent her picture and information to police departments in 10 states. He had checked with hospitals, clinics, and social services offices, but no one had any information about a missing baby or a young mother in trouble. "It's like she appeared out of nowhere," Tom told Jake one afternoon when he stopped by the ranch. "I've never had a case like this before." The baby had learned to walk better and could say many new words. She called Jake Dada Jake and Sarah Mama Sarah. She knew the names of all the animals on the ranch and would get excited every time she saw the horses. What surprised everyone most was how good she was with the animals. Jake had never seen anything like it. When the horses were scared or upset, the baby could calm them down just by being near them. She would walk up to a nervous horse and put her tiny hand on its nose, and the animal would immediately become peaceful. "It's like she has some kind of special gift," Jake told Sarah one evening as they watched the baby playing in the pasture. A young colt that had been wild and difficult to handle was now following her around like a pet dog. "Maybe she grew up around animals," Sarah said. "Maybe her family had a farm or ranch somewhere." This gave Tom a new idea for his investigation. He started calling ranches and farms in a wider area, asking if anyone knew about a family with a young mother and baby who might have gone missing. Tom also decided to put the baby's picture in newspapers in 3 states. Maybe someone would recognize her and call with information. The picture showed her smiling and healthy, sitting on Thunder's back with Jake holding her steady. The newspaper story brought phone calls, but none of them led to any real answers. Several people thought they might know who she was, but when Tom checked their stories, none of them matched. One call came from a woman in Colorado who was sure the baby was her missing granddaughter. But when Tom sent her more pictures, the woman realized she was wrong. Her granddaughter had different colored eyes and was older. Another call came from a man in Texas who said the baby looked like his neighbor's child. But when Tom called the neighbor, the man said his daughter was safe at home and had never been missing. The most interesting call came from a woman named Helen Murphy, who lived about 200 miles away. She said she thought she might know who the baby's mother was. "There was a young woman who worked at my diner for a few weeks about 3 months ago," Helen said. "She had a baby with her, a little girl about the right age. The woman seemed scared of something. She would jump every time the door opened, like she was expecting someone bad to come in." Tom drove to Helen's diner to talk to her in person. The diner was in a small town that was even smaller than the one where Jake and Sarah lived. "Tell me more about this woman," Tom said as he sat at the counter drinking coffee. "She said her name was Maria, but I don't think that was her real name," Helen said. "She paid for everything with cash and never gave me any personal information. She was a good worker, though. Always on time, always polite to the customers. Can you describe her?" "Pretty girl, maybe 22 or 23 years old. Long dark hair, brown eyes. Thin, like she wasn't eating enough. The baby was beautiful. Looked just like her mama." Tom showed Helen the pictures of the baby that Jake and Sarah were taking care of. Helen looked at them carefully. "It could be the same child," Helen said. "But babies change so much. This little girl looks much healthier than the one I remember. That baby was thin and pale, like she wasn't getting enough food. What happened to the woman? Why did she stop working here?" "One day she just didn't come to work. I went to the motel where she was staying, but the manager said she had left in the middle of the night, didn't even pack all her things, just took the baby and disappeared." "Did she ever say anything about why she was scared or where she came from?" Helen thought for a moment. "She talked about her boyfriend a few times. Said he had a terrible temper and that she was afraid of him. She had bruises on her arms sometimes, but she always said she was just clumsy." This was the best lead Tom had found so far. A young mother with a baby, running from an abusive boyfriend. It made sense that she might be desperate enough to leave her child somewhere safe while she tried to get away. "Do you remember anything else about her? A last name? Where she was from? Anything?" "I remember she got a phone call one day that really upset her. After that, she seemed even more scared than before. She kept looking out the window like someone might be watching her." Tom left his card with Helen and asked her to call if she remembered anything else. He also asked her to call if the woman ever came back. On the drive home, Tom thought about what Helen had told him. If this Maria was the baby's mother, then she was probably still running from her boyfriend. She might be hiding somewhere, afraid to contact anyone because she thought he would find her. Tom decided to expand his search. He started calling shelters for abused women in 5 states. Maybe Maria had gone to one of them for help. On his 3rd call, Tom got lucky. A shelter in New Mexico had a woman named Maria, who had arrived about 6 weeks ago. The woman had been alone with no children, but she had been very upset about something. She kept talking about her baby, the shelter worker told Tom. She said she had to leave her daughter somewhere safe. "We thought maybe the child was with relatives or something." Tom asked if he could talk to this Maria, but the shelter worker said she had left 2 weeks ago. They didn't know where she had gone. "Did she leave any contact information?" "No, but she said she was going to try to find work in a big city where her ex-boyfriend wouldn't be able to find her. She mentioned California or maybe Arizona." Tom felt frustrated. Every time he got close to finding answers, the trail went cold again. But at least now he had a name and a possible story about what had happened. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the baby was growing and learning new things every day. She had started to help Sarah in the garden, carrying small tools and trying to water the plants. She loved to collect eggs from the chickens and would giggle when the hens clucked at her. Jake taught her about the horses and cattle. She wasn't afraid of any of the animals, even the big bulls that scared most adults. The animals seemed to sense that she was special and were always gentle with her. "She belongs here," Sarah said to Jake one evening as they watched the baby playing with a new puppy that had wandered onto the ranch. "Look how happy she is." Jake nodded, but he was worried. The longer the baby stayed with them, the harder it would be to give her up if her real mother was found. And he could see that Sarah was thinking of her as their own daughter now. What if Tom finds her mother? Jake asked. What if this Maria comes back for her? Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then we'll do what's best for the baby, she said finally. But I pray every night that if her mother is out there, she's safe. And I pray that whatever happens, this little girl will always know she's loved. The baby ran up to them, carrying the puppy in her arms. Mama, Sarah, Dada, Jake, look, puppy. Sarah picked her up and hugged her tight. Yes, sweetheart, it's a beautiful puppy. As the sun set over the ranch, the three of them sat on the porch steps. The baby fell asleep in Sarah's arms, and Jake put his arm around both of them. They looked like a real family, and in their hearts they felt like one too. But somewhere out there, a young woman named Maria might be thinking about the daughter she had left under an oak tree. And Tom Harrison was still looking for answers that might change everything. It was a Tuesday morning in early fall when everything changed. Sarah was hanging laundry on the line behind the house while the baby played in the grass nearby. The little girl was almost 2 years old now and could run around on her own. She was chasing butterflies and laughing when Sarah heard a car coming up the long driveway. Sarah looked toward the road and saw an old blue pickup truck driving slowly toward the house. The truck looked familiar, but Sarah couldn't remember where she had seen it before. The baby heard the truck too and ran to Sarah, wrapping her small arms around Sarah's legs. The truck stopped near the front porch, and a young woman got out. She was thin and looked very tired. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a faded blue shirt. Sarah could see that the woman was nervous and scared. The woman stood by her truck for a moment, looking at the house and the yard. When she saw Sarah and the baby, she started walking toward them very slowly. "Excuse me?" the woman said in a quiet voice. "Are you Mrs. Mitchell?" "Yes, I'm Sarah Mitchell," Sarah said. Her heart was beating fast because something about this woman seemed important. "Can I help you?" The woman looked at the baby, who was still holding on to Sarah's legs. The baby was looking at the stranger with curious eyes. "My name is Maria Gonzalez," the woman said. I think you have my daughter." Sarah felt like the world had stopped moving. She looked down at the baby, and then back at the woman. This was the moment she had been both hoping for and dreading for months. "Your daughter?" Sarah asked, even though she already knew what the answer would be. Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I left her under an oak tree about 4 months ago. I heard on the radio that a rancher found a baby, and that she was safe. I've been trying to find the courage to come here ever since." The baby seemed to sense that something important was happening. She looked up at Sarah with worried eyes, and then looked at Maria. Something about the woman seemed familiar to her, but she couldn't remember. "What?" Sarah felt tears coming to her own eyes. "Would you like to sit down? Maybe we should talk." Maria nodded and followed Sarah to the porch steps. The baby stayed close to Sarah, but she kept looking at Maria with interest. "She's so beautiful," Maria said, watching the baby. "She looks so healthy and happy. I was so scared that..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "She's been well taken care of," Sarah said gently. "We love her very much. I need you to know that I didn't want to leave her," Maria said quickly. "I would never have done that if I had any other choice. But I was so scared, and I didn't know what else to do." Sarah could see that Maria was telling the truth. "What happened? Why were you scared?" Maria took a deep breath. "My boyfriend Tony, he was very mean to me. He would hit me and say terrible things. When the baby was born, I thought maybe he would change, but he got worse. He said the baby cried too much and that he was tired of taking care of someone else's kid." "Someone else's kid?" Sarah asked. Tony wasn't her father. Her real father was a good man, but he died in a car accident before she was born. I met Tony when I was pregnant and had nowhere to go. At first he seemed nice, but after the baby came, he showed his true self. The baby was playing with a small toy, but Sarah could tell she was listening to the conversation. Children always knew when adults were talking about something serious. "Tony started drinking more and getting more violent," Maria continued. "One night, he grabbed the baby and shook her because she was crying. I knew then that I had to get away from him. But I was scared he would follow me and hurt both of us." Sarah felt angry thinking about someone hurting this sweet little girl. So you decided to leave her somewhere safe? I drove around for hours, trying to figure out what to do. I had no money, no family to help me. I was living in my car. Then I remembered hearing people in town talk about a rancher named Jake Mitchell and how good he was with animals and children. I found out where your ranch was and drove out there. Maria wiped tears from her eyes. I put her under that tree and drove away as fast as I could. But I only went about a mile before I had to stop. I sat in my truck crying for 2 hours, wanting to go back and get her. But I knew Tony would find us eventually, and I couldn't risk him hurting her. What happened after that? Sarah asked. I drove to New Mexico and stayed at a shelter for women who were running from abusive men. I tried to get clean and find work, but every day I thought about my baby and wondered if she was okay. The baby had moved closer to Maria during the conversation. Now she was standing right in front of her, looking at her face carefully. "Mama?" the baby said softly. Maria's face crumpled and she started crying harder. "Yes, baby, I'm your mama. I'm so sorry I had to leave you." The baby reached out and touched Maria's face gently. Even though she was very young, she seemed to understand that this woman was sad and needed comfort. Jake came around the corner of the house just then, carrying a bucket of feed for the horses. When he saw Maria sitting on the porch with Sarah and the baby, he knew immediately who she must be. "You're her mother," Jake said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Maria said. "And I can never thank you enough for taking care of her." The radio said, "A rancher named Jake Mitchell found her." I knew it had to be you. Jake set down the bucket and sat on the porch steps too. We've been hoping someone would come for her, but we were also scared about what would happen when they did. "I don't want to take her away from you if you don't want me to," Maria said quickly. "I can see that she loves you both, and I'm not sure I can take care of her the way she deserves." Sarah felt confused. Part of her wanted to keep the baby forever, but part of her knew that this young woman was her real mother and had been through something terrible. "What's your situation now?" Jake asked. "Are you safe from this Tony person?" "I think so. I've been staying with a friend in California for the past month. I have a job at a restaurant and I'm saving money, but I'm still scared he might find me someday." The baby had climbed into Maria's lap while they were talking. She was playing with Maria's hair and seemed comfortable with her. "She remembers you," Sarah said softly. "I wasn't sure she would. She was so young when I left her." Sheriff Tom Harrison's police car turned into the driveway just then. Sarah had called him as soon as Maria said who she was. Tom had been looking for this woman for months. Tom got out of his car and walked toward the porch. He looked at Maria carefully. "You must be Maria Gonzalez," he said. "I've been looking for you for a long time." Maria looked scared. "Am I in trouble? I know what I did was wrong, but I didn't know what else to do." "You're not in trouble," Tom said kindly. "But I need to ask you some questions and make sure everything is legal. This little girl has been in foster care, and there are procedures we need to follow." Tom sat down with them and started asking Maria questions about her identity and her story. He wanted to make sure she was really the baby's mother and that she wasn't lying about anything. After an hour of questions, Tom was satisfied that Maria was telling the truth. But now they had to figure out what would happen next. The baby had 2 families who loved her, and everyone wanted to do what was best for her. As the sun started to set, the baby fell asleep in Maria's arms. Maria looked down at her daughter's peaceful face, and then looked at Jake and Sarah. "She belongs with all of us," Maria said quietly. "But I don't know how to make that work." The next few weeks were the hardest time Jake and Sarah had ever experienced. Maria was staying at a motel in town while everyone tried to figure out what was best for the baby. Mrs. Foster from Social Services was working with all of them to find a solution that would keep the little girl safe and happy. During the day, Maria would come to the ranch to spend time with her daughter. At first, the baby was confused about who Maria was. She knew Sarah as Mama Sarah and had been calling her that for months. But she also seemed to remember Maria in some deep way that she couldn't explain. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sarah would tell the baby when she seemed confused. "This is your first mama. She loves you very much." The baby would look back and forth between Sarah and Maria, trying to understand why she had two mamas. Sometimes she would cry because it was all too much for her young mind to handle. Maria was struggling, too. She could see how much the baby loved Jake and Sarah. The little girl would run to Jake when she got scared and would ask Sarah to read her stories at bedtime. Maria felt like an outsider in her own daughter's life. "Maybe I shouldn't have come back," Maria told Sarah one afternoon while they watched the baby playing with the horses. "She's happy here. She has everything she needs." "She needs you too," Sarah said, even though it hurt her to say it. "You're her mother. That bond can't be replaced." Maria had been going to counseling sessions with a therapist who helped women who had been in abusive relationships. The therapist was helping Maria understand that leaving her baby hadn't made her a bad mother. She had been trying to protect her child the only way she knew how. But Maria was still scared about many things. She didn't have much money. She didn't have a permanent place to live. And she was still afraid that Tony might find her someday and hurt her or the baby. "What if I'm not strong enough to protect her?" Maria asked Sarah one evening. "What if Tony finds us and something bad happens?" "You were strong enough to save her life," Sarah said. "You made the hardest decision any mother could make because you wanted her to be safe. That's the strongest thing anyone could do." Jake was having his own struggles. He had fallen in love with the baby, just as much as Sarah had. The little girl followed him around the ranch, helped him feed the animals, and fell asleep in his arms when she was tired. The thought of losing her was breaking his heart. "I know she belongs with her real mother," Jake told Sarah one night when they couldn't sleep. "But it's going to kill me to say goodbye to her." "Maybe we don't have to say goodbye completely," Sarah said. "Maybe there's a way for all of us to be part of her life." This gave Sarah an idea. The next day she talked to Mrs. Foster about different options for the baby's future. "What if Maria moved closer to us?" Sarah asked. "What if we could help her get back on her feet while still being part of the baby's life?" Mrs. Foster thought this was an interesting idea. "There are programs that help young mothers who are trying to escape abusive situations. We could see if Maria qualifies for help with housing and job training." They had a meeting with Maria, Jake, Sarah, Mrs. Foster, and the therapist. Everyone sat around the kitchen table at the ranch while the baby played in the living room. "Maria, what do you want for your daughter's future?" Mrs. Foster asked. "I want her to be safe and happy," Maria said. "I want her to have a good education and people who love her. I want her to know that her mother didn't abandon her because she didn't love her." "And what do you want for your own future?" "I want to be strong enough to take care of her. I want to have a stable job and a safe place to live. I want to never be afraid again." Sarah reached across the table and took Maria's hand. "What if we helped each other? You could move here and get a job in town. The baby could stay with us during the day while you work, and you could have her on evenings and weekends. We could all raise her together." Maria looked surprised. "You would do that? Even though it means you couldn't adopt her?" "We just want what's best for her," Jake said. "And what's best for her is having her real mother in her life, along with people who love her and can help keep her safe." The therapist thought this was a good idea. Many children benefit from having multiple adults who care about them. It could work if everyone is willing to communicate and work together. But Mrs. Foster had concerns. This kind of arrangement can be complicated. What happens if Maria meets someone new and wants to move away? What happens if Jake and Sarah want to make decisions about the baby that Maria doesn't agree with? They talked for hours about all the possible problems and how they might handle them. It was clear that this wouldn't be easy for anyone. But it also seemed like the best way to make sure the baby had everything she needed. Over the next few days, they worked out a plan. Maria would apply for a program that helped abused women get job training and housing assistance. If she was accepted, she would move to an apartment in town and start working toward becoming financially independent. In the meantime, the baby would continue living with Jake and Sarah, but Maria would have her every weekend and one evening during the week. As Maria became more stable, she could have the baby more often. The hardest part was explaining everything to the baby. She was still very young and didn't understand all the grown-up problems, but she seemed to sense that the adults in her life were trying to figure out how to make everyone happy. "Baby stay with Mama Sarah and Dada Jake?" she asked one day when Maria was visiting. Yes, sweetheart, Sarah said. You'll stay here and your first mama will visit you lots. Two mamas? The baby asked. Yes, you have two mamas who love you very much. The baby seemed to accept this explanation. Children are often better at adapting to unusual situations than adults are. Maria was accepted into the assistance program and found a small apartment above the bakery in town. The apartment was tiny, but it was clean and safe. More importantly, it was only 10 minutes away from the ranch. She also got a job waitressing at the diner where Helen Murphy worked. Helen was happy to have her back and promised to help her, save money, and build a stable life. I'm proud of you for coming back, Helen told Maria on her first day. It took a lot of courage to face this situation. The first weekend that Maria had the baby overnight was difficult for everyone. Sarah cried after they left, and Jake was grumpy all evening. The house felt empty and quiet without the baby's laughter. But when Maria brought her back on Sunday evening, the baby was happy and excited. She hugged Jake and Sarah tight and told them all about the things she had done with her first mama. We went to park, the baby said, and we saw ducks. Maria looked tired but happy. She was wonderful. She didn't cry at all, and she slept through the night. Slowly, everyone began to adjust to their new arrangement. It wasn't perfect, and there were still many challenges ahead, but the baby was thriving. Maria was getting stronger and more confident, and Jake and Sarah were learning that love doesn't have to be possessive. The little girl who had been left to die under an oak tree now had more people who loved her than most children ever have. She had her biological mother, who had sacrificed everything to keep her safe. She had Jake and Sarah, who had opened their hearts and home to her when she needed it most. And she had an entire community that had rallied around her from the very beginning. It wasn't the traditional family that any of them had imagined, but it was filled with love, and that was what mattered most. 1 year had passed since Maria came back into her daughter's life. The baby was now 3 years old and had grown into a confident, happy little girl. She could speak in full sentences, knew all her colors and numbers, and had never met an animal she was afraid of. The arrangement between Maria, Jake, and Sarah had worked better than anyone had expected. Maria had completed her job training program and was now working as a manager at the diner. She had saved enough money to move into a bigger apartment and had even bought a used car. More importantly, Maria had grown stronger and more confident. The scared, thin young woman who had arrived at the ranch a year ago was now a capable mother who could take care of herself and her daughter. She was taking classes at the community college and planning to get a degree in business. The baby, who they had started calling Hope because that's what she represented to all of them, spent weekdays with Jake and Sarah and weekends with Maria. She was comfortable in both homes and never seemed confused about the arrangement anymore. Mama Maria, can we go see the horses today? Hope asked one Saturday morning as Maria was making breakfast. After we finish eating, we'll go to the ranch, Maria said. Mama Sarah said she has a surprise for you. Hope clapped her hands excitedly. She loved surprises and she loved spending time at the ranch. The horses had become her best friends, and she could ride the gentlest one all by herself now. When they arrived at the ranch, Sarah was waiting on the porch with a big smile. Jake was there too, looking like he was trying to hide something behind his back. What's the surprise? Hope asked, running up the porch steps. Well, Jake said, bringing his hands forward, we thought you might like a friend. In Jake's hands was a tiny puppy, no more than 8 weeks old. It was brown and white with floppy ears and the biggest brown eyes Hope had ever seen. Hope gasped and reached for the puppy carefully. She had learned to be gentle with small animals. Is it mine? If you want it to be, Sarah said. But you'll need to help take care of it. Puppies need lots of love and attention. I'll take good care of him, Hope said, holding the puppy close to her chest. What's his name? That's up to you, Maria said. What do you think we should call him? Hope looked at the puppy's brown and white markings and thought carefully. Patches, she said finally. His name is Patches. Patches seemed to approve of his new name by licking Hope's face, which made her giggle with delight. As the months went by, Hope, Patches, and the whole family settled into a comfortable routine. Hope was old enough now to understand that her situation was different from other children's, but she didn't think of it as strange. To her, it was normal to have 2 homes and 3 parents who all loved her. Maria had been dating a man named David who worked at the bank in town. He was kind and patient, and he seemed to genuinely care about both Maria and Hope. David had never been married and didn't have children of his own, but he was learning to be part of their unusual family. "Are you sure you can handle all this?" Maria asked David one evening after Hope had fallen asleep during a movie at his apartment. "It's not just me you're getting involved with, it's Hope and Jake and Sarah and our whole complicated situation." "I love you," David said simply. "And I love Hope. And I respect what you've all built together. I don't want to change it. I just want to be part of it." Jake and Sarah liked David and were happy that Maria had found someone who treated her well. They had worried about what would happen if Maria met someone who didn't understand their arrangement or who wanted to take Hope away from them. But David seemed to understand that Hope's unusual family was what made her so secure and happy. He never tried to replace Jake as a father figure. Instead, he found his own special place in Hope's life as someone who taught her to fish and helped her build sandcastles at the lake. On Hope's 4th birthday, they had a big party at the ranch. The whole town came to celebrate, including Sheriff Tom Harrison, Mrs. Foster, Helen Murphy, and all the neighbors who had helped when Hope first arrived. Hope wore a purple dress that Maria had bought for her and cowboy boots that Jake had given her. She rode Thunder around the pasture for all the guests to see, with Jake walking beside the horse to keep her safe. "Look at me, everyone," Hope called out as Thunder walked slowly around the yard. "I'm a real cowgirl." Everyone cheered and clapped. Hope had become the town's adopted daughter, and everyone was proud of how well she was doing. During the party, Maria made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I have something important to tell you all," Maria said when everyone was gathered around the picnic table for cake. "David asked me to marry him, and I said yes." Everyone started talking at once, congratulating Maria and David. But Hope looked confused. "What does that mean?" Hope asked. "It means that David is going to be part of our family officially," Maria explained. "He's going to be your stepfather." "Will I still live with Mama Sarah and Dada Jake too?" "Yes, sweetheart," Maria said. "Nothing about that will change. You'll still have 2 homes and all the people who love you." Hope thought about this for a moment. Then she smiled. "So I'll have even more family?" "That's right," Sarah said, hugging Hope tight. "You're the luckiest little girl in the world." After the party, when most of the guests had gone home, Maria, David, Jake, and Sarah sat on the porch watching Hope play with Patches in the yard. "I have something else I want to talk to you about," Maria said. "David and I have been discussing our future, and we want to ask you something." Jake and Sarah looked at each other, wondering what Maria was going to say. "We want to make this arrangement official," Maria continued. "We want you to legally adopt Hope too, so she'll have all of us as her real parents." Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes. "Are you sure? That's a big decision." "I'm sure," Maria said. "Hope belongs to all of us. She always has. I want her to know that she'll always have you, no matter what happens in the future." It took several months to work through all the legal paperwork, but eventually, it was done. Hope Mitchell Gonzalez officially had 4 parents: Maria, David, Jake, and Sarah. On the day the adoption was finalized, they all went to the oak tree where Jake had found Hope almost 4 years earlier. Hope was old enough now to understand the story of how she came to live with them. "This is where Dada Jake found you," Sarah told Hope as they stood under the big tree. Hope looked up at the branches and then at all the adults who loved her. "I'm glad Mama Maria put me here," she said simply, "because that's how I got my whole family." Maria knelt down and hugged her daughter. "I'm glad too, baby. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was also the best thing." Hope looked at the tree again and then at Patches, who was sniffing around the base of the trunk. "Can we come back here every year on my birthday?" "Of course we can," Jake said. "This tree is special to all of us now." As they walked back to the car, Hope ran ahead with Patches, laughing and playing in the warm sunshine. Behind her, 4 adults followed, watching her with love and pride. The little voice that had once cried, "Mama," in desperate loneliness now, called out to multiple people who would always answer. Hope had learned that families come in all different shapes and sizes, and that love multiplies when it's shared instead of divided. She was no longer the abandoned baby who had been left to die under an oak tree. She was Hope Mitchell Gonzalez, beloved daughter of a family that had been brought together by tragedy, but held together by love. And every night when she went to sleep, whether it was at the ranch with Jake and Sarah or in town with Maria and David, Hope knew that she was exactly where she belonged.